Hello, everyone. This is Michael Solomon, and welcome to Observations of Enclosed Cosmology. Let's start out with some basics. So let's start with a foundation in daily reality. Distance, size, and time has no effect on physics, meaning the basic attributes of creation does not change with circumstances. For example, the characteristics of fire never change. The light of a candle, the warmth of a fireplace, the smoke of a bonfire, or the destructive power of a volcano all share the same set of traits. Fire burns, consumes oxygen, produce light, radiate heat, create smoke, and is extinguished with water. The manifestation of these traits will vary due to circumstances, of course, but constants will never change. If we keep this foundation in mind, discerning reality from fiction will cease to be a problem. As we go through this presentation, let's keep those basics in mind. I'm often asked this question: who are you to challenge years of scientific discovery? What are your credentials? I have been an animator, illustrator, and photographer for a little over 30 years now. So let me just spend a little time and tell you what those skills are. Physics of light, composition, perspective, perception of 3D environment, color theory, spatial relationships, sense of timing. I must have the skill to predict results while experiencing and working in the world around me. So, as we're discussing the flat Earth, enclosed cosmology, the first thing we need to look at is flat Earth history. This phenomenon, this reality, is not new. It's pretty old. The history of enclosed cosmology didn't start in 2015. The resurgence started in 2015, but this subject has been around for a long time. Check these books out. These have been around since the 1800s. Zetetic astronomy, flat Earth, Earth a plane, zetetic astronomy, Earth not a globe, and so on. Alex Gleason. These books have been around a long time, and they all talk about enclosed cosmology in detail. Let's look at ancient cultures. A culture's art is a window to its history. If you want to know anything about an ancient culture, look at their artwork. Look at their creations. Okay, we're going to look at these examples that you saw in the animation. I'm going to flip through these rather quickly. And I want you to keep your mind wrapped around the artwork, the ancient artwork you're about to see. Babylonian, Sumerian, Celtic, Hebrew, Hindu, Inca, Islamic, Mayan, Navajo, Norse, Egyptian, Greek. If you'll notice, when you look at all of this artwork, when you view all of it, you notice there are similarities. Now, the interesting part is that this artwork is very old, and much of it is spanning thousands of years and thousands of miles in all completely different cultures. These people did not have social media and they didn't talk to each other, okay? So when you look at all of these examples of their view of our world, is this what you come up with? Uh-uh. Absolutely not. If you look at all of these examples of what they say our world looks like, a spinning globe is not what you come up with. Let's take the aspects of each piece of art and build a picture from it. All right. So basically, you have a base. Okay. You see a base in all of them. So we have a base here. Then, if you notice, all of them have some type of covering. Even the Norse tree of life here, all of them has some type of covering over the base. All right, so let's add that. So you have the covering here. Next, all of them have the celestial bodies, the moon, the sun, and the stars underneath the covering, the dome, as it were. So if you notice that, the Egyptian, you see the Mayan here, I believe that's Mayan, Hebrew, of course, and you see the stars and all the celestial bodies under the dome. The other similarity is that each worldview has an underneath realm. It has a space underneath, some type of cavern system or some space underneath the primary plane of the world. Lastly, you'll see that all of them have some type of support. The world is supported by something, columns, and the Egyptians have a god that's supporting the earth. The Hebrews have columns here, and the trees has roots. So if you'll notice, there supports under each illustration. When trying to prove the reality of enclosed cosmology, modern science can be a great help. All you must do is recognize the contradictions and impossibilities. When a concept, claim, or statistic does not reflect, support, or confirm reality, it is not real. So, modern science can be a great help when you're trying to discern and verify the reality of the world we live in. Do not ignore them. But this is their motto, okay? This is their unspoken view of us. Don't believe what you see, believe what we say. Remember, proving the reality of flat Earth is similar to validating any concept. It takes a collection of evidence, direct or indirect, that leads to a logical conclusion, a verdict that can sustain honest, determined scrutiny. Keep that in mind as we move forward. Check this out. These are a bunch of styrofoam or plastic disposable plates. Can you tell whether they're upside down or right side up? it's not hard to view them in the wrong way. Perception, a way of regarding, understanding, or interpreting something, a mental impression. Perspective, the appearance of things relative to one another as determined by their distance from the viewer. Perception is mental, perspective is physical. This confusion in terms is a common technique used by modern science to give a legitimate meaning to an unprovable concept. Let's continue our exploration of evidence with curvature. This is a small animation that I created to explore what modern science says about curvature. So we're traveling along this digital ball here, and we saw the lighthouse come across the horizon. So now we're going to keep on moving until we end up at the sailboat. All right, you saw how the sailboat appeared above the horizon based on what modern science says. And if you'll notice here, right here, that you wouldn't be able to see the sailboat as it's beyond the curve, okay? Because our line of sight is a straight line only. All right, so let's examine that. So we have here this boat on the horizon, all right? And you have the horizon line, the water of the horizon line, and we're using the P900, the Nikon P900. So I'm going to zoom out, and as you can see, the sailboat is getting smaller until we can see nothing. There's nothing there. With the naked eye, you cannot see anything. And the reason why you can't see anything based on modern science is the boat is beyond the curve. Now, the distance of that boat is 5 miles. My eye level is 3 feet. So the obstruction, if you do the math, the obstruction is 5.7 feet. So there's 5.7 feet of that boat I should not have seen, yet we saw almost all the boat, okay? And the reason why we didn't see some of the bottom of the boat was due to perspective. So if you notice, there's some of the boat that you can't see, and you can't see it because of perspective, but not because it's beyond the curve. Because if it were truly beyond the curve, I could not see that boat at all. No matter how far I zoomed, if we were living on a ball, I should say, there's no way I could have zoomed in and I would have seen like just the sail, just the top of the sail. All right, here we have a clearer day. Again, there's nothing on the horizon. You can see a couple of boats here. There's a lighthouse there, but I'm going to be zooming into this area here. And as you can see a boat right here, but that's not the boat I'm looking for. Oh, by the way, I call this habit horizon hunting. So what I would do is grab my camera, go out on the water. Well, not really on the water. I'm on the pier. And I would try to see what I can see, okay? And so I'm hunting for whatever I can't see. I'm using the Nikon P1000. So, I'm getting ready to zoom in. Here I go, I'm zooming in. Already you can see the sailboat and this boat here. That's not a sailboat, it's a motorboat. And also you can see these guys here floating on the water. I think they're on jet skis or something like that, okay? But as you can see, as I zoomed in, these guys appeared, okay? But according to the math here, they're about 10 miles away. My eye level's 5 feet. So therefore they should be the obstruction should be 35 feet. Yet I can zoom right in on them. My eyesight is in a straight line, okay? So I'm not going to be able to see around the curve, but according to the math here, I have 35 feet of obstruction between me and those boats. Okay, the distance of hundreds of miles shot with a Nikon P1000. So as you can see here, this guy photographed all these mountains, and you can see it's hundreds of miles. There's no way he should have been able to see this. It should have been hundreds of miles of obstruction covering these peaks, and yet he saw them and photographed them. Let's move on. So, my deduction, according to this evidence, according to conventional science, the naked eye cannot see an object beyond the horizon due to the Earth's curvature. Yet, when focusing on that very spot with a telephoto lens or viewing it at a high elevation, you can clearly see objects hundreds of miles away. This is not possible on a globe. Therefore, the Earth is flat. The deduction is simple if you're willing to accept the evidence. Now let's examine the moon as another bit of evidence to prove enclosed cosmology. What is the distance of the moon? I created this graphic with the information supplied by the conventional scientific community. According to this graphic, the moon is 238,900 miles away from the Earth, and the moon is 4 times smaller than the Earth. So it's still pretty big, okay? And pretty far, according to modern science. This is the moon causing crepuscular rays. So as the clouds were moving across the moon was above the clouds, and it was causing these beams of light. And we're going to explore crepuscular rays further in the presentation, but this is very important. We'll come back to it. Here is another video that gives some evidence of how close the moon truly is. So you have here clouds in front and behind the moon. Though the moon, according to modern science, is 239,000 miles away. How is this happening? Here is another video showing the clouds are clearly behind the moon and in front of the moon. The moon is amongst the clouds. Keep that in mind. So, according to modern science, that is an illusion. What we saw with the moon being amongst the clouds is an illusion due to the amount of light the moon is reflecting. So let's explore that. I have here a little bit of cotton here and some cotton here, and there's a light source here. So this is mimicking what we saw. Let's see if the light has any effect on how the perception of the placement of the clouds. So I am turning down, and you can hear it. I'm actually turning down the amount of light. And as you can see, the clouds are in front of the light source still, all right? So we're going to turn the light up, and the clouds are still in front of the light source. They do not appear to be behind it, as you can see here and as you can see here. Let's try it again. I have my pretend clouds further away, so this cloud bank is still in the same spot. These clouds are further away from the light source. So let's see if the light has anything to do with the perception of placement. So as you can see, I'm dropping the light down, the amount of light. So I'm going to increase the light. And as you can see, the clouds do not appear as if they are behind the sun. They, my light source, they still look like they're in front of the light source. So the amount of light did not change the perception of placement. Okay, let's look at something else here. So we have a Lufthansa flight 480 Munich to Denver at 36,000 feet. That's 7 miles. So we have here the plane is clearly above the clouds. Okay, and that's at 36,000 feet. This is a standard elevation. 28,000 to 36,000 feet is a standard commercial elevation for commercial planes. All right, here we have another plane that is a Cessna, much smaller, okay? And they are flying at 28,000 feet. Look what we have here. This is the sun, ladies and gentlemen. The sun is under the clouds. And as you can see, the sun is quite far away from the horizon. Here is the horizon right here. Here is the sun under the clouds. All right? And the sun is pretty far away from the earth. The sun is 93 million miles away, according to modern science, yet the sun is under the clouds. Why does the moon shine? According to modern science, the moon shines because its surface reflects light from the sun. So we're going to look at various aspects of moonlight. Okay, first of all, let's explore what color temperature is. This chart is how you measure the color temperature of a source of light. For example, you have tungsten light, which is about 1800 degrees Kelvin. That's where you get the yellowish color from. And then let's jump up here to an electric flash or direct sunlight. The electric flash is about 5,000, a little under 5,000 Kelvin, but that is basically daylight balanced. And then we have the direct sunlight at noon, and that's at 5,500 degrees Kelvin. That's pretty standard. A matter of fact, that is the standard of measuring light, the color of light. And then you have here fluorescent light. This is pretty interesting. It has a range from 4,000 to 6,000 degrees Kelvin. It depends on what type of fluorescent light. So if you'll notice, each temperature has a specific color. And the higher the temperature, the cooler the color. Keep that in mind. Okay, so let's look at color balance in a practical way. So we have my granddaughter's big teddy bear, and then we have a white wall here and a white lampshade and some brown wood. But you can't really see those true colors because my camera is not white balanced. So you can tell your camera what light source is in the room. Right now, it's a tungsten light. And remember, tungsten light is a very warm light. So tungsten light is, let's see what temperature that is again. So tungsten light is about 1800 degrees Kelvin. Okay, so let's flip back. So we're going to white balance this bear. So adjusted the controls on my camera. We are white balancing and watch the bear. Look at that. Wow. Now the white balance is correct. It's set for tungsten light. And when you set your camera for tungsten light, you will end up with a properly colored scene. So you have the white wall, you have the white bear, the wood is less saturated, The shade is much closer to white, and the human eye does this automatically. The human eye is some pretty serious tech, and it white balances automatically, so you rarely see that high yellowish gold color that you saw before. Okay, so what we're going to do here is check the temperature of the moon. Okay, so this is another aspect of the light of the moon, and all of these aspects of moonlight we're going to come to a conclusion at the end of this part of the presentation, so bear with me. So I have a thermometer here, a laser thermometer, and I'm checking moonlight. So I recorded myself actually doing this experiment. I am attempting a moon temperature test, and I am metering my shadow. As you can see, the temperature is fluctuating a little bit, but it's at 39. It's getting colder. 38. My hand isn't the most still, so it's going around 38. Okay, now I'm going to go over to the moon light, and as you can see, the moonlight is reducing in temperature. 37, 37.4. It's dropping pretty quick. As you can see, the temperature dropped significantly, and the temperature dropped when I measure the moonlight compared to the shade, the moon shade. Now, usually it's the other way around. When you measure light, the sunlight, or any other type of light actually, the light is supposed to be warmer than the shade. But with the moon, it's the other way around. The light is cooler than the shade. Okay, so let's explore that. So, sunlight and moonlight. Sunlight and moonlight. What I did was I white balanced the moon, just like I white balanced the bear. All this talk about the different aspects of light, these are the facts that we come up with, okay? Let's look at that. Sunlight is 5,500 degrees Kelvin. When I measured the moonlight, when I white balanced the moonlight, it was 4,000 degrees Kelvin. See the difference? Okay. Sunlight is warm. Moonlight, based on when I used the laser thermometer, moonlight was cool. I have to say that again, okay? Sunlight is warm. Moonlight is cool. Sunlight is cooler in the shadows. Moonlight is warmer in the shadows. Sunlight is white. Moonlight is a bluish light. Oh, and by the way, if you notice, moonlight is 4,000 degrees Kelvin when you white balance the moon. Next time you take your camera out, white balance the moon, and you'll see that the moonlight is the same color temperature as a fluorescent light. Remember that chart. It's the same color temperature as fluorescent light. Keep this in mind. Characteristics of reflected light is not different from the source of light. The conclusion as far as the aspects of light on the moon is the moon is its own light source. Okay? The moon is its own light source because the moon light is a completely separate, it's a completely different type of light from the sun. Now here's another aspect of the light shining on the moon. Here's a ball, okay? Here's a 3D model I made of the moon, real basic, okay? So we're going to show how you see how the light moves on the ball? And the light on a sphere always has a specular highlight and quick fall off. What that means, you see this spot right here? That's called a specular highlight. And the light gets dimmer as the distance between the highlight and the shadow increases. The light gets dimmer as it radiates around the ball. This is how light reacts on a ball every single time. It's the same result. All right. This is a full moon. All of you have seen it. The full moon is lit from edge to edge. It's so bright you can actually read a newspaper in your backyard. We've all experienced this. If it were reflected light, there would be a specular highlight and you would see light fall off, meaning the light would gradiate from bright to dark as it travels around the alleged curvature of the moon. Yet, this is not what we experience in the real world. The moon is evenly lit from edge to edge. This is further evidence that the moon is its own light source. It does not reflect light from the sun. Now, let's look at moon craters. Craters on the moon are caused by asteroids and meteorites colliding with the lunar surface. This is what modern science says. Let's explore that. Okay, here I have an animation, a real simple animation, and here's my moon surface, okay? No craters or anything, not yet. So this is my moon surface here, and the moon rock or an asteroid or meteor or something like that is going to hit my basic surface here. Boom. Okay, look at that. You see how it came down at an angle respective to my pseudo surface here, and you see the groove that it created, and you see this upraised part here. That's how a crater should look, because the asteroids and the meteors and all types of debris all throughout space, in quotes, will be hitting the moon from all different directions. So you're going to see a lot of scraping, a lot of channels, and you're going to see a lot of these upraised crest of debris. Here's another animation. Again, here's my little moon surface here, and boom. All right. So it hits the surface, it comes straight down, perpendicular, and it creates this beautiful crest here. Does this look familiar? It looks very similar to all the craters on the moon. The craters on the moon look exactly like this, but the only way to create a crater like this is for the space rock to hit the surface perpendicular, okay, straight down relative to the surface of the moon, and then you get this result. Craters are round impacts, not tracks caused by angled entry. So, if you'll notice, look at these craters. I shot this with the P900. Look at these craters. Look at how round they are. Do you see any grooves? Do you see any tracks? Do you see any drag marks where the impact scraped along the moon and caused all these different lines? You would see scrapes and lines. It would look like a cat used it for a scratching post. I mean, the moon should be a mess, yet it has these interesting round craters everywhere. These almost perfectly round. I mean, It's pretty interesting, actually. Look at all that. So in order for these craters to have been caused by space rocks moving at fantastic velocities from all different directions, there's no way they would have caused these almost perfect, look at these, perfect indentations. Deduction. The moon is roughly 5 to 7 miles above the earth. How did I come to that conclusion? Because the moon was amongst the clouds. Remember that? The moon was amongst the clouds. This is a deduction from all the information, all the observations that I just explored here. So the moon has to be 5 to 7 miles high. Let's be liberal. Let's give it 10 miles. Okay? Because some clouds are that high. So if it's going to be in the midst of the clouds, and the clouds are 5 to 7 miles high, 28,000 to 36,000 feet, then the moon must be in the midst of the clouds. The moon does not share the same characteristics as the sun. Therefore, it is a completely separate light source. I said that before, but it bears saying again. If it does not share the characteristics of the light source that it is seemingly reflecting, then it is a completely different light source. It's just that simple. The reflected light on an object is not different from the source that's providing the light. The aspects of the characteristics of that light does not change just because it's being reflected. Another point. So, what are the details called craters? Okay, let's be honest. We don't know. We don't have enough real information to fully answer that question. But we do know they are not massive impacts caused by flying rocks in space. So, we don't know what they are. We don't know what these markings are. I mean, I've heard some pretty interesting theories, and I'm open to them. I mean, the earth is flat, so I'm open to whatever theories. But what we do know is that they aren't giant rocks flying at ballistic speeds through space. So now we will focus on our last bit of evidence, crepuscular rays. And I saved this one for last because it has a lot of parts to it that really gives serious evidence to support enclosed cosmology. Crepuscular rays. There's a lot of names for them. Sun rays, cloud bursts, that's a new one. Backstays of the sun, Jacob's ladder. I know a lot of you've heard of that one. Sun rays, sunbeams, God rays. Sun drawing water, that's an interesting one. Devil's rays, okay, that's not good, but that's a name that some cultures have used. Shafts of light, that's pretty common. So that's what crepuscular rays are. Okay, this is a web page straight from the Gateway to Astronomy Photography of the Earth website from NASA. And this is what they say crepuscular rays are. So let's look at an explanation for that. Okay, so sunbeams are parallel shafts of sunlight passing through gaps in clouds. Their apparent convergence is a perspective effect, similar, for example, to the way parallel railway lines seem to converge at a point in the distance. So again, here are their photographs. These are high altitude photographs of crepuscular rays, and they indeed look parallel. All right, they're not spreading out at an angle as we see them in the world. But something's interesting about these photographs, and this is from the NASA website. You can go to the NASA website, you can view them, you can download them for free because your tax dollars pay for it, quite a bit of your tax dollars. So Here's what's interesting about this. Number one, these are not beams of light. These are actually shadows. Because if you see here, the sun seems to be low in the sky. Well, not really low, but moving away from the clouds. And because of their position, they are causing these long shadows. And these shadows are being cast on what looks like water or just a cloud bank. I don't think that's water. Those are clouds. Those are just more clouds. And these are actually shadows, not beams of light. Let's examine what they claim crepuscular rays are. Okay, they said that what you're seeing when you see crepuscular rays in the sky, you're basically experiencing single point perspective. Here is single point perspective. You see how the railroad tracks are parallel to your point of view, and they are converging into the distance, and this is perspective, single point perspective. But here's a problem with that. Single point perspective, or this type of convergence, is position dependent only. Let me show you how. Okay, so I shot this video. That's me right there. And as you can see, as I move the camera, look at that. The perspective disappears. And as I move the camera along the line, viewing the side of the tracks, you see no single point perspective. Okay. Now, as I pan the camera back to original position, as my line of sight is lined up with the tracks, now I experience single point perspective. And I keep moving. Look, the perspective is disappearing and the tracks are now flat, and you do not see the convergence. These tracks are not converging here, and they aren't converging here. They are just normal tracks. Okay? Perspective is position dependent only. Here's another example. Here's the hallway. This is the apartment building that I live in. So here's the hallway here. Okay? And you can see at my position in the hallway, the lines of the hallway converge. They're converging here. They're converging here because of my position. Now, if I were to turn my head to this wall, I would still see the wall, just like I see the wall here, but there would be no convergence. Single point perspective is, or any type of, when you experience perspective of this type, where the lines converge, that is position dependent. You have to be at a certain position to experience this phenomenon. So, what does that mean? Perspective has nothing to do with crepuscular rays. Absolutely nothing. So, what are we seeing then? If they truly are not parallel beams of light coming from a giant sun, what are we seeing? Okay, so I have another diagram here, and as you can see, I'm showing how far, according to NASA, how far the sun is away from the Earth, which is 92.96 million miles, or 93 million miles away. The sun is huge. This is not to scale. According to science, the Earth is a whole lot smaller than this. And the sunlight, because the sun is so massive, as you can see here, it's pretty massive, 864,000 miles in diameter. So the sun is pretty big, and the rays of light coming from the sun are far larger than the Earth. Keep that in mind. And also, 93 million miles away. This is important. Okay, so according to modern science, we should see this. When you see light beams, they should be coming straight down, and they should be everywhere. There should be a veritable field of light beams coming through the clouds, when that happens, when there's breaks in the clouds, beams should be everywhere from near you all the way to the horizon. They should be everywhere because of the size of the sun and because NASA says they should be parallel, but also due to the size of the sun, they should be everywhere. But instead, we see this: localized light beams coming from specific parts of clouds. Now, sometimes you're going to see, like, you'll see them here, and you'll see a little bit here and a little bit here, but you don't see them everywhere. You never see sunbeams everywhere. And also, you also view sunbeams from a distance. In order for perspective to be the reason why this convergence happens, you would have to be directly under the light source in order for that to be true. Yet, you always see, and we all know this, we always see crepuscular rays from a distance. Perspective doesn't work that way. Look at the street here. Look at this. Perspective is position dependent only. I have to say it again. Perspective has nothing to do with crepuscular rays. Nothing. And that is huge. Let's find out why. Let's look at the architecture of crepuscular rays. How is it truly created? If it has nothing to do with perspective, and it has nothing to do with this humongous exploding hydrogen bomb in space, how is it created? Here's the formula: obstruction, proximity, and particulates. Obstruction, in this case, would be the clouds. Proximity means the position of the sun in relation to the clouds. Particulates is what the light beams are illuminating in order to create the light beams. So in this case, it's mist, because we're above water here. So it's mist. But crepuscular rays can be created by any light source close to an obstruction. It doesn't matter what the light source is. And as long as you have some type of particulate, meaning mist, pollution, dust, pollen, fog, any type of particulate will cause this effect, as long as you have the light source and the obstruction. Now, here's the interesting part: proximity. In order to have this phenomenon happen, the light source has to be very, very close. And I'm talking kissing close to the obstruction. All right, let's explore that. Here's a little experiment I did. So I have here my light source, which is a simple $7 mag light I bought from Walmart. It's not even a mag light. It's just a LED light. It's not even anything expensive. Here's some pegboard, and I drilled some holes in it, as you can see. And I have some baby powder around here somewhere, somewhere over here. Now, this experiment can be done by anyone. I have all these light stands and stuff because I'm a photographer, so I have all this stuff already, but you don't need all this. So let's look at the components here: obstruction, proximity, particulates. My obstruction is a pegboard with holes, and I drilled some more holes in it. Proximity is my mag light or my flashlight, and it's really close. You see how close that is? It's really close. And my particulates will be baby powder. It doesn't have to be baby powder. In fact, I would advise you not to use baby powder. It was messy. Smelled great, but it was messy. It got everywhere. So use a humidifier or something that creates some type of mist or something. Don't use baby powder. It's crazy. So here's my experiment. All right, so as you can see, the light on the floor is caused by the holes in the pegboard. Look at the baby powder. Look at that. Look at those crepuscular rays. Look at that, okay? And the camera is to the side of the light source. Yet we are seeing converging light beams from the light source, okay? Now, I created this, but you have to have the obstruction, proximity, and the particulates in order to create this. Look at that. Those are legitimate crepuscular rays. And this is done on stage, on movie sets. This is how it's been done artificially for years, all right, decades. In any theater or a movie set, you ask anyone that is in charge of practical effects, and they will tell you that this formula here, right here, is the only way you can create crepuscular rays. Okay, now let's try a different variation on a theme. So we have here my flashlight, and now I move the flashlight far away. So we're exploring what NASA says. So I move my flashlight far away. So now the light source is as far as I could get it. As you can see, my ceiling is kind of low here. This is on my patio. So my ceiling is kind of low. It's about 7 feet, and it's slanted too. So I moved it really high, but I still have my obstruction pegboard, the proximity of my light, and my baby powder somewhere around here, and that's my particulate. So now, again, here's my setup, and as you can see, the holes got a whole lot smaller. Remember, they were really big, but when I move the light away, the holes focus down and they're actually sharper, okay? Now, here we go. Oh, look at that. Look at my light beams. They're almost perpendicular. They're almost completely straight down. They're almost horizontal, just like NASA said, and they're right. Almost. Now, the only reason they aren't perfectly straight is because, again, my ceiling was only so high. But look at that. Look at the difference between what they were and what they are now. But we do not see this in creation. We do not see this normally. We don't see light beams going straight down. They may vary in angle, but they're always angled. Let's move on. This is a very interesting shot. This is a picture of the scenery or the situation where I took the pictures you're about to see. This is a lot of fog. This was taken from 14 stories high, and this fog is dense, and it lasted for, man, half the day. It was amazing. As you can see here, I shot this in a rainy, it was drizzling, and I jumped on my bike and I rode down the street and I shot several pictures of crepuscular rays. This is a street light. These are tree branches, and what the light is illuminating is fog and a slight drizzle that's coming down. This is legitimate crepuscular rays, but if you notice, my light source, the street light, is very close to the leaves. Okay, the street light's tall, and so are the trees, and the trees are blocking the street light, and the street light is shining through the gaps in the branches and the leaves. And I'm getting this dramatic lighting here due to the particulates in the air, the fog primarily. But the light source is very close to the tree. It wouldn't do this any other way. Again, we have our obstruction, our leaves, proximity is street light, particulates is a fog. Here's another shot. This is my favorite shot. It has like a noir look like you should see Humphrey Bogart walking down the sidewalk or something. This is another example. Same day, same conditions. Here's the street pole, and here's the light extending from the pole, and it's in the midst of the leaves, and it's shining through the leaves. The light is really, really close. You have the same formula. Leaves are the obstruction, the proximity is street light, and the particulate is the fog. Okay, here we go. Look at this. Let's look at this again in creation. So we have the clouds are the obstruction, the proximity is the sun, and the particulates are the mist. Remember earlier we had the moon doing the same thing, okay, same conditions. But the sun has to be close to the clouds in order to cause this effect, just like the street light, just like my experiment. The beautiful thing about experiments, by the way, the reason why experiments work so well and that you can accumulate so much accurate data from experiments is because whatever works in the micro works in the macro. So experiments is simply the conditions you want to mimic at a smaller scale. And just like I showed you that video where everything works the same, whether it's small or large, it works the same. If you remember that video at the very beginning. So you have here crepuscular rays from a light source that's very close. It has to be, because there's no other way this would happen. What are my deductions from all of this data about crepuscular rays? Oh, and here you have it again. This was at Beulah Beach at one of the Take on the World conferences. Occurring naturally or man-made, there is only one way this phenomenon can be experienced: with a very close light source that causes a domino effect of conclusion, because the light source has to be very close and it has nothing to do with perspective. So we have, what are the conclusions? Since the sun has to be within the clouds to create crepuscular rays, it has to be within the clouds or else this would not happen. The sun is not in space. That's a big one. No giant sun for the planets to orbit means no solar system. No solar system means no planets. The non-existence of planets supports the conclusion of a flat Earth. Remember at the very beginning of this presentation, I said that the evidence supporting flat Earth is direct and indirect evidence. Curvature is direct. It doesn't get any more in your face than that. Crepuscular rays is indirect. It's a preponderance of evidence that supports the existence of enclosed cosmology. And what I presented here today was a small collection of evidence. I could have gone so much further, but I only have so much time. And again, perspective has nothing to do with crepuscular rays. The evidence of the truth was designed by Yahweh to be easily understood. I have to read that again because it's so amazing. The evidence of the truth was designed by Yahweh to be easily understood. In the final analysis, it comes down to what one is willing to believe: truth or fiction. Don't accept, verify.